The Andorian system had been peaceful for 300 years. Their blue and green planet spun slowly around a yellow star, home to billions of people who had never known war. Cities with tall glass towers reached toward the sky, and silver ships moved between planets carrying goods and families. The Andorians believed their advanced shields and strong fleet would protect them from any danger. Admiral Zexthul stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the Andorian world grow larger on his screen. Behind him stretched a fleet of 200 ships, each one the size of a city. These were the ships of the Korthak Empire, and they had never lost a battle. For 1,000 years they had swept across the galaxy like a dark wave, conquering every world they found. The admiral was tall and thin, with gray skin and cold black eyes. He had destroyed 47 civilizations in his long career. To him, conquest was not cruel. It was simply the way of the universe. The strong took from the weak. The smart defeated the foolish. This was natural law. The Andorian fleet came out to meet them. 100 sleek ships with bright energy weapons and powerful shields. They looked impressive, but Zexthul had seen thousands of fleets just like them. The Andorian sent a message asking the Korthak ships to leave their space. The admiral smiled and gave his standard reply, "Surrender now and your people will serve the Empire. Fight us and your world will burn." The Andorians chose to fight. Their ships opened fire with beams of pure energy that could melt mountains. The weapons hit the Korthak shields and bounced off like raindrops on stone. Then the Empire fired back with plasma cannons that turned matter into burning gas. The first Andorian ship exploded in a ball of white fire. Then the second. Then the third. The battle lasted only 6 hours. The Andorian fleet was gone, their planet's shields broken, their cities in flames. Admiral Zexthul watched the surrender message arrive and felt nothing. This was victory number 48. Soon there would be 49, then 50, then more. The galaxy belonged to the Korthak Empire, one world at a time. But one small ship escaped the burning system. Captain Veltar pushed his damaged vessel to its limits, jumping through space toward a distant yellow star. His crew was dead, his weapons gone, his ship barely flying. But he carried something more important than weapons. He carried a warning. Far away in a system called Sol, humanity went about its daily life. Earth spun peacefully around its sun, unaware that death was coming. The human space fleet was small but proud. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and hundreds of smaller ships protected the home system. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded them all from his flagship, the UNS Defiance. Morrison was a good man with kind eyes and gray hair. He had served in the fleet for 30 years, fighting pirates and protecting trade ships. But he had never seen real war. None of the humans had. They thought their weapons were powerful and their ships were fast. Compared to most of the galaxy, they were right. Compared to the Korthak Empire, they were children playing with toys. Captain Lisa Parker was on patrol duty at the edge of the system when her ship's computers detected something strange. She commanded the UNS Ranger, a fast destroyer with a crew of 200 brave men and women. Her tactical officer was Commander Rick Taylor, a young man who loved to solve puzzles and find new ways to fight. Her chief engineer was Maria Santos, a woman who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. The strange signal was weak and fading fast. Parker ordered her ship to investigate. They found the wreckage of an alien vessel, badly damaged and leaking air. Inside was Captain Veltar, dying but still alive. With his last breath, he told the humans about the Korthak Empire, ships that blot out the stars, weapons that crack planets in half, an army that has never known defeat. They conquer every world they find and make slaves of every people they meet. They are coming here, to your Earth. You have perhaps days before they arrive. Parker and her crew stared at the dying alien in shock. They had always wondered if other intelligent life existed in the galaxy. Now they knew, and they wished they didn't. The universe was full of life, but it was also full of death, and death was coming to Earth. Veltar died with a sad smile on his face. He had done his duty and delivered his warning. Now it was up to the humans to decide what to do with it. Would they run? Would they hide? Would they surrender without a fight? Parker looked at the faces of her crew and saw the same thing in every pair of eyes. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something the Korthak Empire had not seen in a very long time. Defiance Commander Taylor was the first to speak. His voice was quiet but steady. "Captain, we need to warn Admiral Morrison right away, and then we need to figure out how to fight these things." Chief Santos nodded and added her own thoughts. If their technology is so advanced, maybe we can learn from this wreckage. Sometimes the best weapons come from understanding your enemy. Parker gave the orders to head home at full speed. As the UNS Ranger turned toward Earth, she thought about her family, her friends, and her world. In a few days, everything might be gone, or maybe, just maybe, humanity would surprise everyone, including themselves. Behind them, the wreckage of the Andorian ship drifted in the darkness, a monument to a peaceful people who had died fighting for their freedom. Soon humanity would face the same choice, and unlike 48 other civilizations, they were already planning to fight back. Admiral Morrison stared at the recording of the dying alien's words for the 10th time. Captain Parker had returned to Earth with news that changed everything. The bridge of the UNS Defiance was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of space traffic around Earth. Morrison was a man who had seen many things in his 30 years of service. But nothing had prepared him for this. The alien wreckage had told them much about their enemy. The Korthak ships were built with materials stronger than anything humans had ever seen. Their weapons used plasma hot enough to melt steel in seconds. Their shields could stop nuclear weapons like they were thrown stones. Everything about them was designed for one purpose: total destruction of anything that stood in their way. Morrison called an emergency meeting of all ship captains. They gathered in the main conference room, dozens of experienced officers who had never faced anything like this. The room was filled with worried faces and quiet voices. When Morrison spoke, his words were calm but heavy with meaning. We have perhaps 48 hours before they arrive. We can evacuate as many people as possible to the outer colonies, but most of Earth's population will have to stay. We can surrender and hope they show mercy, but the evidence suggests they do not know the meaning of that word. Or we can fight. Captain Parker stood up from her seat. Her voice was clear and strong when she spoke. Admiral, we studied their ship technology all the way back to Earth. Chief Santos found something interesting. Their weapons are incredibly powerful, but they follow very strict patterns. Their shields are nearly perfect, but they cycle through different frequencies every few minutes. If we can predict those changes, we might be able to hurt them. Commander Taylor added his own thoughts to the discussion. Their ships are massive and powerful, but that also makes them slow. Our destroyers and fighters are much faster. We cannot match their firepower, but we might be able to avoid it long enough to find weak spots. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the choice was clear. They would fight, not because they thought they could win, but because running away meant the death of billions of people. Every captain in the room agreed. They would make the Korthak Empire pay for every inch of space they took. 2 days later, Admiral Zexthul's fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 200 massive ships appeared like dark mountains against the stars. Each one was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. Behind them came smaller ships, but even these were larger than anything humans had ever built. Zexthul stood on his bridge and looked at the human fleet approaching them. 48 small ships against his mighty armada. He had seen this scene many times before. Usually the enemy would see his fleet and surrender immediately. Sometimes they would try to run. Very rarely they would attempt to fight. It never mattered. The result was always the same. The humans sent a message to his ship. Zexthul expected the usual plea for mercy or offer of surrender. Instead, he heard something that surprised him. This is Admiral Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have entered our space without permission and threatened our people. Leave now or we will destroy you. For a moment, Zexthul was too shocked to respond. In over 1,000 years, no species had ever threatened the Korthak Empire. These tiny humans with their primitive ships actually believed they could fight him. It was almost amusing. He decided to teach them a lesson about power before destroying them completely. I am Admiral Zexthul of the Korthak Empire. You will surrender your world and serve us, or you will die. You have 1 hour to decide. The human response came back in less than 5 minutes. We choose to fight. The battle began badly for humanity. Zexthul ordered his ships to fire slowly and carefully, wanting to destroy the human fleet one ship at a time to make them suffer. The first Korthak plasma blast hit the destroyer UNS Valiant and turned it into glowing gas in seconds. 3 more human ships died in the next few minutes. Their crews vaporized before they could even scream. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of retreating or clustering together for protection, the human ships scattered in all directions. They began moving in patterns that made no sense to Korthak tactical computers. Some ships flew straight at the enemy fleet, others circled around at high speed, and still others seemed to be running away only to turn back and attack from a different angle. Captain Parker led her squadron in the first successful attack run. The UNS Ranger and 3 other destroyers came in fast and low, using the confusion to get close to a Korthak cruiser. Chief Santos had been right about the shield frequencies. At exactly the moment she predicted, the enemy shields flickered to a new setting. For 3 seconds they were vulnerable. Parker's ships fired everything they had into that 3-second window. Nuclear missiles, railgun rounds, and energy beams all hit the same spot on the enemy ship's hull. The weapons barely scratched the thick armor, but they did something more important. They proved that the Korthak ships could be hurt. Commander Taylor was watching the battle from the bridge of his ship when he noticed something else. The Korthak weapons were incredibly powerful, but they were also slow to turn and aim. Their ships were built to fight other massive vessels in formation battles, not fast-moving fighters that darted around like angry wasps. He sent out new orders to all human ships. Stay close to the enemy vessels. Move too fast for their big guns to track. Hit them when their shields cycle, then run before they can return fire. It was a desperate plan, but it was working. For the first time in the battle, more Korthak ships were taking damage than human ones. Admiral Zexthul watched his tactical display with growing concern. The humans were like nothing he had ever fought before. They had no formation, no discipline, no proper tactics. They just attacked from everywhere at once with no pattern he could predict. Worse, they were actually damaging his ships. Not destroying them, but making them bleed in a way that no enemy had done for centuries. The breakthrough came when the destroyer UNS Hurricane, commanded by Captain Kate Williams, managed to get a lucky shot through a Korthak shield at exactly the right moment. The nuclear warhead detonated against the enemy ship's main power coupling, causing a chain reaction that crippled the entire vessel. For the first time in over 1,000 years, a Korthak ship was dead in space. The sight of their damaged ship sent a shock through the Korthak fleet that Admiral Zexthul could feel. His crew was looking at him with questions in their eyes. How could these primitive humans hurt them? How could such a small fleet cause such problems? For the first time in his long career, Zexthul began to doubt that this would be an easy victory. But the humans were learning too. Every few minutes they adapted their tactics based on what they had seen. They found new ways to avoid Korthak weapons, new patterns to confuse enemy targeting systems, and new methods to exploit the brief moments when enemy shields were weak. What had started as a hopeless last stand was becoming something that nobody had expected. A real fight. The battle had been raging for 18 hours and both sides were learning hard lessons. The space around Earth was filled with wreckage from destroyed ships and the bright flashes of weapons fire. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, watching his fleet dance a deadly dance with the Korthak Armada. They had lost 12 ships, but they had damaged over 30 enemy vessels. No one had expected the fight to last this long. Dr. Alex Bennett was working frantically in his laboratory aboard the research station orbiting Mars. He was a nuclear physicist who had spent his life studying the power of atoms. But today he was learning about alien technology. The wreckage from the destroyed Korthak ship had given him ideas that could change everything. Bennett had discovered that Korthak shields worked by creating a field of energy around their ships. This field could stop almost any weapon, but it had a weakness. When it switched from one frequency to another, there was a brief moment when the entire system had to restart. During that restart, the shields were completely down for exactly 2.5 seconds. But Bennett had found something even more important. Human nuclear weapons could be modified to create an electromagnetic pulse that would force the Korthak shields to restart early. It would not destroy the enemy ships, but it would create those precious seconds of vulnerability whenever the humans needed them. He sent his findings to every human ship in the fleet. Chief Santos was the first to understand what this meant. She worked with her engineering team for 6 straight hours, modifying every nuclear torpedo on the UNS Ranger. When they were finished, they had weapons that could strip away enemy defenses on command. Captain Parker was leading her squadron through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter when the new weapons were ready. The belt was full of rocks the size of mountains, spinning slowly through space like a maze of stone and metal. Parker had an idea that would use both the asteroids and the new technology to create something the Korthak had never seen before. Commander Taylor understood her plan immediately. They would turn the asteroid belt into a trap. Human mining ships, hastily armed with weapons and armor, began hollowing out the largest asteroids. Inside each rock, they built hidden weapons platforms with powerful guns and missile launchers. From the outside, they looked like ordinary asteroids. From the inside, they were fortresses. Admiral Zexthul was growing tired of this strange battle. His fleet was supposed to be conquering Earth by now, not chasing tiny human ships around like children playing games. He decided to end this farce by pursuing the human fleet into the asteroid belt and destroying them all at once. His massive ships could easily blast their way through any rocks that got in their way. The Korthak fleet entered the asteroid belt in perfect formation, their huge ships moving slowly but steadily through the floating rocks. Zexthul smiled as he saw the human ships ahead of him, apparently trapped between his fleet and the dense field of asteroids. This would be over soon. Then the asteroids started shooting back. Weapons platforms hidden inside dozens of asteroids opened fire at the same moment. Railguns and missile launchers that had been carefully aimed and targeted for hours unleashed everything they had at the surprised Korthak ships. The enemy had been expecting to fight the human fleet, not the asteroids themselves. But the real surprise came when Captain Parker fired the first modified nuclear torpedo. The weapon hit a Korthak dreadnought and exploded in a burst of electromagnetic energy. The enemy shields flickered and died, leaving the massive ship completely defenseless for 2.5 seconds. In those precious moments, 20 hidden weapons platforms focused all their fire on one target. The Korthak ship, powerful enough to destroy cities, was torn apart by conventional human weapons. Its hull cracked like an eggshell, atmosphere rushing out into space in great white clouds. The crew inside, who had thought themselves invincible, died in seconds as their ship broke apart around them. The destruction of the first dreadnought was just the beginning. The human fleet used the asteroids as cover, darting between the rocks to launch hit-and-run attacks on the confused Korthak ships. Modified nuclear weapons stripped away shields while conventional guns tore into exposed hulls. The asteroids themselves became weapons when mining ships used mass drivers to accelerate them toward enemy vessels. Chief Santos had another brilliant idea during the battle. She realized that the Korthak ships were designed to fight in open space, where they could use their size and power advantages. In the crowded asteroid belt, their massive weapons were actually working against them. Every time they fired their main guns, they risked hitting asteroids and creating deadly shrapnel that damaged their own ships. She shared this observation with Commander Taylor, who immediately saw the tactical opportunity. He ordered all human ships to stay close to the largest asteroids, using them as shields. When the Korthak tried to fire, they either hit the rocks and created dangerous debris, or they held their fire and gave the humans free shots at their hulls. The battle in the asteroid belt lasted 8 hours and changed the course of the war. When it was over, 17 Korthak ships had been destroyed or heavily damaged, while humanity had lost only 6 vessels. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Korthak Empire had suffered a major defeat. Admiral Zexthul sat in his command chair, staring at the damage reports in disbelief. How had this happened? How had a species with primitive technology and tiny ships managed to hurt his mighty fleet? The humans had not just fought back, they had won. They had taken his weapons of conquest and turned them into tools of their own victory. But the humans were not finished. News of the asteroid belt victory spread through the Earth fleet like wildfire. Civilian ships began arriving at the battle zone, converted freighters and passenger liners now bristling with makeshift weapons. Humanity was no longer just defending itself. It was learning to fight back. Captain Kate Williams arrived in the converted luxury liner UNS Golden Dawn, now armed with missile launchers and railguns. Her ship was not built for war, but it was fast and her crew was determined. She had spent years navigating asteroid fields as a commercial pilot, and now she was using those skills to hunt Korthak ships. Dr. Bennett continued working on new weapons and tactics from his laboratory. Every day brought new discoveries about Korthak technology and new ways to exploit their weaknesses. The humans were adapting and evolving their methods with each battle, something their enemy had never experienced before. Admiral Morrison looked at the reports from the asteroid belt and allowed himself a small smile. They had done the impossible. They had hurt the Korthak Empire and lived to tell about it. But he knew this was just the beginning. The enemy would adapt too, and they would come back with new weapons and new tactics. The real test was still ahead. In the distance, Earth continued to spin peacefully around its sun, unaware that its children had just won their first victory in a war that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Humanity had discovered something about itself in the asteroid belt. When cornered and facing extinction, humans did not surrender. They got creative. The message from Admiral Zexthul reached the Korthak homeworld 3 days after the disaster in the asteroid belt. Supreme War Leader Kethmore read the report with growing anger and disbelief. 17 ships destroyed by a primitive species that should have surrendered within hours. It was impossible, but the evidence was right there in front of him. Kethmore was the most feared military commander in the galaxy. He had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds and destroyed fleets 10 times larger than the human force. But more than that, he understood the political reality of the situation. If news of this defeat spread to other conquered species, it could spark rebellions across the entire empire. The humans had to be destroyed quickly and completely. Within 12 hours, Kethmore was leading the largest war fleet ever assembled by the Korthak Empire toward the Sol system. 300 ships, including massive dreadnoughts with armor thick enough to survive nuclear explosions, and weapons powerful enough to crack moons. But even more dangerous were the new technologies they brought with them. Korthak scientists had studied the battle recordings from the asteroid belt and developed countermeasures for every human tactic. Adaptive targeting systems that learned from human evasion patterns and predicted where they would go next. Plasma mines that could be scattered through space to make hit-and-run attacks suicidal. New shield generators that changed frequency so quickly that human weapons could never predict the cycles. Admiral Morrison stood in the conference room aboard the UNS Defiance, looking at intelligence reports that painted a grim picture. Scout ships had detected the massive enemy fleet approaching from 3 different directions. The humans would be outnumbered 8-1, and this time the enemy was prepared for their tricks. Captain Parker had been promoted to Commodore after her success in the asteroid belt, but the victory felt hollow now. She looked at the tactical displays and saw certain death approaching Earth from all sides. The Korthak fleet was too large, too well prepared, and too angry to be stopped by the same tricks that had worked before. The new battle began with humanity's hidden bases in the asteroid belt being systematically destroyed. Kethmore had learned from Zexthul's mistakes and sent specialized hunter ships to find and eliminate every weapons platform the humans had built. The rock fortresses that had seemed so clever were blown apart one by one. When the main fleets engaged near Jupiter, the difference in technology became immediately clear. The adaptive targeting systems tracked human ships with deadly accuracy, making their speed and maneuverability useless. The plasma mines filled space with invisible death, destroying any ship that tried to make an attack run. Worst of all, the modified nuclear weapons that had been so effective before now did nothing to the new Korthak shields. Human ships began dying faster than they could be replaced. The converted civilian vessels, brave but fragile, were the first to go. Captain Williams' UNS Golden Dawn took a direct hit from a plasma cannon and simply disappeared in a flash of superheated gas. The mining ships that had fought so well in the asteroids were hunted down and destroyed by enemy fighters. Admiral Morrison made the hardest decision of his life. Rather than watch his fleet be destroyed piece by piece, he ordered a desperate attack on the Korthak command ship. If they could not win the battle, perhaps they could at least hurt the enemy enough to buy Earth more time. The UNS Defiance led 20 remaining ships in a suicide charge toward Kethmore's massive flagship. The attack was doomed from the start, but it was magnificent in its futility. Morrison's ships crashed through the enemy defensive screen like a spear thrown at a mountain. They fired everything they had at the command ship's hull, doing real damage but not enough to stop it. One by one, the human vessels were destroyed until only the Defiance remained. Morrison stood on his bridge as enemy fire tore his ship apart around him. With his dying breath, he sent one last message to the remaining human forces. Do not let them break you. Find a way to win. Commodore Parker found herself in command of fewer than 50 ships, all that remained of humanity's once proud fleet. Earth was defenseless, its orbital stations destroyed and its defensive platforms silent. Korthak ships were already beginning their bombardment of the planet's major cities, sending pillars of fire down from space. In his laboratory, Dr. Bennett was working frantically on one last desperate idea. If human technology could not match Korthak power, Perhaps they could use something even more powerful than technology. The sun itself could be turned into a weapon, but the cost would be terrible. Everyone in the solar system, human and alien alike, might die. Bennett had discovered that a precise series of nuclear explosions in the sun's corona could trigger an artificial solar flare. The electromagnetic pulse would be powerful enough to disable every electronic system in the solar system. Korthak ships, completely dependent on their advanced computers, would be left floating helpless in space. But human ships would be just as dead. The plan was insane, but it was the only chance left. If both fleets were disabled, victory would go to whoever could adapt fastest to fighting without their technology. The question was whether humans, who had spent their whole war learning to improvise and adapt, could recover faster than aliens who had relied on superior equipment for 1,000 years. Parker listened to Bennett's explanation with growing understanding. It was a gamble with the highest possible stakes, but it was the only move left on the board. She looked at her crew, the same people who had discovered the alien warning, fought in the first battle, and survived everything the enemy had thrown at them. Commander Taylor spoke for all of them when he said the words that would decide humanity's fate. Let's do it. If we're going to die, let's make sure we take them with us. Chief Santos began preparing the UNS Ranger for its final mission. They would have to get close enough to the sun to deliver the nuclear charges at exactly the right points in the corona. It was a one-way trip into the heart of a star, but if it worked, it would change everything. If it failed, humanity would be extinct within hours. Supreme War Leader Kethmore watched Earth burn and felt satisfaction for the first time since arriving in this cursed system. The humans had fought well, better than any species should have been able to fight, but in the end, superior technology and numbers had won. Soon this would all be over, and the galaxy would remember that the Korthak Empire could not be defeated. He had no idea that humanity's greatest weapon was not any ship or gun, but their willingness to sacrifice everything for a chance at victory. In a few hours, he would learn why humans were different from every other species in the galaxy. They never gave up, even when giving up was the smart thing to do. The UNS Ranger raced toward the sun at maximum speed, carrying humanity's last hope in its cargo bay. Commodore Parker sat in the captain's chair, watching the star grow larger on the main screen. Behind them, the Korthak fleet continued its bombardment of Earth, unaware that their victory celebration might be premature. Chief Santos worked frantically in the engine room, pushing the ship's systems far beyond their design limits. The heat from the sun was already making the hull glow red, and they were still millions of miles away from their target. Dr. Bennett's calculations had been precise. They needed to deliver 12 nuclear charges to specific points in the sun's corona to trigger the artificial solar flare. Commander Taylor monitored the approach from his station, calling out distances and temperatures to the crew. The ship was designed to operate in the cold vacuum of space, not the blazing heat near a star. Every system was running hot, and several were already showing warning signs of imminent failure. Behind them, 49 other human ships followed in a desperate convoy. Each one carried part of the nuclear payload needed to make the plan work. If even one ship failed to reach its target, the entire mission would fail and humanity would die for nothing. But every captain and crew member had volunteered for this suicide run, knowing they would never see Earth again. Supreme War Leader Kethmore noticed the human ships moving toward the sun, but dismissed them as cowards trying to escape. Let them burn themselves up in the star if they wanted to. It would save him the ammunition needed to destroy them. He turned his attention back to the bombardment of Earth, watching cities disappear in pillars of plasma fire. The first wave of human ships reached their deployment points and began launching their nuclear charges into the sun's corona. The weapons disappeared into the blazing atmosphere like stones thrown into an ocean of fire. For a few moments, nothing seemed to happen. Then the sun's surface began to ripple and twist in ways that had never been seen before. Dr. Bennett's plan was working perfectly. The nuclear explosions were creating a chain reaction in the sun's magnetic field, building up energy that would soon be released as the largest solar flare in recorded history. But the human ships delivering the charges were paying a terrible price. One by one, they were being consumed by the star's heat. Parker watched her fellow captains die as heroes, steering their burning ships into the sun to complete their missions. Captain Williams had been right when she said they would make the enemy pay for every inch of space they took. Now they were making them pay with the fire of a star itself. The UNS Ranger was the last ship to deploy its charges. As Santos pushed the engines to their breaking point, Parker aimed the final nuclear weapons at their target points in the corona. The ship was falling apart around them, hull plates buckling from the heat and systems failing one after another, but they were so close now. The last nuclear charge launched just as the Ranger's engines exploded. The ship tumbled helplessly toward the sun, its crew watching the star grow larger and brighter until it filled their entire view. In their final moments, they saw something beautiful and terrible, the sun's surface erupting in a wave of energy that would sweep across the entire solar system. The artificial solar flare burst from the sun like the hand of an angry god. A wall of electromagnetic energy raced outward at the speed of light, invisible but more powerful than any weapon ever built. It reached Mercury in seconds, Venus in minutes, and Earth in 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Every electronic device in its path simply stopped working. Aboard the Korthak flagship, Kethmore watched in horror as his instruments went dark one by one. The massive dreadnought that had seemed so invincible moments before was now nothing more than a dead metal shell drifting in space. All around him, 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy had been reduced to powerless hulks. But the Korthak were not the only ones affected. Every human ship and space station was also dead, their computers fried by the same electromagnetic pulse that had crippled the enemy fleet. For a few hours, the solar system was completely silent except for the radio static caused by the solar storm. Then something remarkable happened. While Korthak crews sat in their dark ships waiting for their technology to somehow fix itself, human engineers were already working. Chief Santos and thousands like her throughout the fleet began the process that would define the next phase of the war. They started fixing things by hand. Human ships had always been built with manual backup systems because humans did not trust technology completely. Korthak vessels designed for 1,000 years of technological superiority had no such safeguards. While alien crews panicked in the darkness, human teams were already restarting engines with hand cranks and manual controls. Commander Taylor organized the first boarding parties, using chemical rockets and magnetic grapples. Human Marines launched themselves across space toward the helpless Korthak ships, carrying explosives and projectile weapons that did not depend on electronics. For the first time in the war, humans would fight their enemies face to face. The boarding actions were unlike anything in galactic history. Korthak warriors, trained to fight with energy weapons and personal shields, found themselves facing humans with chemical explosives and metal bullets. The aliens' advanced armor was useless against old-fashioned human aggression and determination. Ship after ship fell to human assault teams. The same people who had spent months learning to outthink advanced alien technology now proved they could outfight alien soldiers with primitive weapons. Captain Williams led one of the most successful boarding parties, fighting through the corridors of a Korthak dreadnought with nothing but courage and a pistol. The final battle took place aboard Kethmore's flagship, where the Supreme War Leader found himself trapped on his own bridge as human Marines stormed through his ship. For the first time in his long career, he was forced to fight personally rather than commanding from safety. The proud warrior who had conquered 100 worlds was defeated by a human sergeant with a knife. The surrender of the Korthak fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Word spread through captured alien communication networks to every enslaved world in the Empire. The species that had been considered invincible for 1,000 years had been defeated by a primitive race that most aliens had never heard of. Rebellions broke out on dozens of worlds as enslaved populations realized that their oppressors could be beaten. The Andorians, survivors of the first attack Parker had witnessed, joined with humans to form the Galactic Liberation Fleet. Other species followed, eager to fight alongside the people who had shown them that freedom was possible. Admiral Parker, promoted after the greatest victory in human history, led the new fleet to liberate world after world. The captured Korthak ships, once symbols of oppression, now served as tools of freedom. Human officers trained alien crews in the tactics that had won the war: creativity, adaptability, and the willingness to never give up. Years later, children on 1,000 worlds would learn the story of how humanity's fleet had blocked the stars themselves to win freedom for the galaxy. They would hear about Captain Parker's discovery of the alien threat, Admiral Morrison's heroic sacrifice, and the brave crews who flew into the sun to save everyone. But most importantly, they would learn that no enemy is too strong if you refuse to surrender and keep fighting with everything you have. The Korthak Empire was gone, replaced by a galaxy where different species worked together as equals. Humanity had not conquered the stars like their enemies had tried to do. Instead, they had liberated them, proving that sometimes the best way to win a war is to make sure no one else ever has to fight one again.